Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock. They're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can choose. Even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other. Peace out and word to your mother. They're from the best decades. Movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun. Action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions free. Come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast.
Well, it's the 30-something movie podcast, and we're over here smoking for The Mask from 1994. It is Jim Carrey month. We are dedicating an entire month to that absolute madman who was in a TV show and had 3 movies that came out this year, and among probably a million other things he was doing. But, yeah, it's Jim Carrey month this month, so we're doing Jim Carrey movies because he had 3 that came out in 94. He had, last week we talked about Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. This week is The Mask. Next week is Dumb and Dumber, and then we're going to round the month out by talking about our favorite skits of his from In Living Color, which was from 1990 to 1994. So, insanity is what it is. Absolute insanity.
Yeah.
It's Jim Carrey chaos. So,
Yeah.
you can hear Patrick Canigallo back there. Pat, how are you doing?
Great, John. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. And then Bo Warmbold. Yo, Bo. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one. This was an absolute favorite. I probably went a little crazy for this movie, and I've got a little bit of background with the comic books before seeing the movie and all that. We'll get into all that, but yeah, really, really excited to talk about this one. So real quick, before we get started, spoiler alert, we spoil freely here, so if we start to talk about a movie you don't want to hear anything about, maybe just hit that little skip button a couple times, and we should be past that, and you should be safe. So that's pretty much our warning. If you have not visited our website, 30podcast.com, it's got all the places where you can leave us ratings, voicemails. You can join us over on Patreon. If you join us over there as a paid member on Patreon to help support the show, then there's a bunch of bonus episodes. We have a ton of bonus stuff over there at this point. And there's all kinds of other benefits as well. So it's a great place to be, and it's so much fun to have gotten to know all of our different Patreon folks over there, and been adding some new people on there lately, so just very, very excited. Looking forward to having some of them even come on the show with us here very, very soon. So all kinds of good stuff going on over there as well. But yeah, so I think we can jump right on into this one. The Mask came out on July 29th, 1994, rated PG-13. Runtime of 1 hour, 41 minutes, directed by Chuck Russell, who did A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and The Scorpion King. Writers were Mike Werb, who did the screenplay, also did Face Off. I wonder if he included the part in the screenplay where they walk slow motion through the church while the doves are flying behind them. That's one of my favorites.
Great scene.
It's a total John Woo moment. And he also did Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Michael Fallon did the story, did Uncle Buck, the TV series, American Dragon, the Jake Long TV series, and Mark Verheiden also did some of the story. He did Time Cop and the 2007 horror comedy My Name is Bruce, starring one of my favorites, Bruce Campbell. Producer on this one was Bob Engelman, who did Mortal Kombat and Blade 2. Composer was Randy Edelman, who did Gettysburg and The Last of the Mohicans. Cinematographer was John R. Leonetti, who did Insidious and The Conjuring. Editors were Arthur Coburn, who did The Fugitive and Lethal Weapon 4, and Brett M. Reed, who did Meet Joe Black and Red Dawn. Wolverines! Production company was Dark Horse Entertainment. Budget was $23 million, box office $351.6 million. So it made lots of money. Flick Metrics gives it a 65%, and Cinema Score gives it a B+. Jim Carrey played Stanley Ipkiss and The Mask. He was in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and Dumb and Dumber. Cameron Diaz was Tina Carlisle. She was in There's Something About Mary and Charlie's Angels. Peter Reigert played Lieutenant Mitch Kellaway. He was in Animal House and Local Hero. Peter Green was Dorian Tyrell. He was in Pulp Fiction and The Usual Suspects. Amy Yazbek played Peggy Brandt. She was Robin Hood Men in Tights and Problem Child. Richard Jenney, 2007, passed away, played Charlie Shoemaker. He was in The Aristocrats and The Mask 2. Orestes Matasina played Nico. He was in Diggstown and The Lady Killers. Tim Bagley played Irv Ripley. He was in Knocked Up and This Is 40. Nancy Fish was Mrs. Peenman. Mrs. Peenman. The Exorcist 3. And Dennis's favorite, Howard the Duck. Johnny Williams, who passed in 2005, played Bert, who was in Goodfellas and Hoodlum. Reg E. Cathy, who died in 2018, played Freeze. He was in The Wire and Fantastic Four. And Dennis Forrest, who died in 2002, played Sweet Eddie. He was in The Cliffhanger and Air Force One. One of my favorite little bits of trivia for this movie is that, because when I think of this movie, I think of this, and we were talking about it as we were watching it, and one of the things I was saying while we were watching this is, it's a little bit Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes.
It's a little bit, it has a little bit of the aesthetic of Dick Tracy to it.
Yeah.
And it's got a little bit of Beetlejuice to it too.
Yes.
So it's like a mixture of a lot of these different things. But one of my favorite trivia things about this is the CGI and the special effects hold up so well in this movie because I think they didn't have to use too many of them. Because the trivia piece that I really enjoy about this is because Jim Carrey's body movements were so flexible and cartoonish anyway, they didn't need to be enhanced digitally, so they saved a lot of money on special effects just by having Jim Carrey play the mask.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So what I also enjoy is the comic accurate oversized teeth for the mask. Originally, they were only meant to be in his mouth during scenes where he was not going to be speaking, but he actually learned to speak while wearing them. So that kind of helped keep the whole thing going, and he had those giant teeth in the entire time.
That's cool.
One of the other ones I enjoy is the iconic yellow suit that we see him wearing and is often on a lot of the posters and everything else, is based on a suit that Jim Carrey's mother made for him when he was first trying stand-up comedy.
Did you see the time that he was in that suit for the movie?
The time that he was in the suit.
Like, I think it's 5 minutes of screen time.
Oh, yeah.
That's the incredible thing. It's like the iconic suit, but he was always in so many different other costumes.
Right. Yeah. A little John trivia related to this movie. I love this movie so much that the Halloween after it came out, I usually, like, my mom would often make our Halloween costumes, so we'd never spent a lot of money on Halloween costumes. For the October after this movie came out, I went to the store and I bought the mask, like rubber mask, Halloween mask that you could get. And we, I believe, went to like a Goodwill or some kind of a secondhand store spot. And I couldn't find a yellow suit, but I found a purple suit. So I bought a purple suit and I had this green mask, rubber mask that I wore for Halloween. And that is what I was for Halloween that year. And I enjoyed it so much. And this would never fly in school nowadays. But I even tried to wear that mask as much during the school day as I could one day in school. It actually went okay. Some of my teachers did not give me a hard time.
That's impressive.
Most impressive.
It was really strange. I didn't tend to cause any problems. I was a little goofy and a little weird, but I didn't tend to cause any problems. We had just moved back from England, so I was academically advanced in all my classes because in England we were about, a year and a half to 2 years ahead of the Missouri public schools. So I always was doing well in class, and I didn't cause any problems, and I think they just kind of figured, we got more people to worry about than that kid.
Yeah.
So I think they just kind of left me alone.
He's trying a thing.
Producers wanted to cut out the Cuban Pete musical number, thinking it was too long and not funny.
Boy, they got that one wrong.
And then they showed it to test audiences and basically said, "You're stupid."
Yeah.
Originally, the part of Tina Carlisle was supposed to go to Anna Nicole Smith. Cameron Diaz at this point had no acting experience whatsoever. And she, I think, auditioned for this several times. And the trivia I found was that she was only cast in this about a week before filming started.
Did you say she auditioned multiple times?
Yeah, I thought I read like 12 times.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah. He was paid $450,000 for his role in The Mask.
Jeez.
Which is next to nothing. So after this and Ace Ventura came out, and Dumb and Dumber, no, it was this one and Ace Ventura that came out first in 94. By the time he got to Dumb and Dumber in 94, he was making $7 million for that one.
Wow.
So not bad to go from the, I mean, I look at my own salary and I think the $450,000 is just fine for me, but to go from the $450,000 to $7 million, I mean, that's a noticeable difference there.
He quickly became a hot property in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then one of the other ones I think is kind of fun is Cameron Diaz. When she was singing, her voice was dubbed by Susan Boyd. And Susan Boyd, you may also know from a bunch of other movies that she has done, as in particular a lot of cartoons. I think she did a bunch of different voices for The Little Mermaid. She was in a bunch of different cartoons. Oh, she was voices in Mulan, one of the American Tail movies, one of the follow-ups to All Dogs Go to Heaven. So yeah, she's done a bunch of different stuff, but she was the voiceover artist who dubbed over Cameron Diaz's singing lines.
See?
Much like we talk about with Robin Williams, a lot of Jim Carrey's lines in this were completely ad-libbed. They just kind of let him loose, let him do his thing. Oh, there were plans for a sequel, and Jim Carrey, I think, just decided, nope, I think I'm okay. Unfortunately, the follow-up we got to this was Son of the Mask, which, have either of you ever tried to watch that?
No. I haven't made the attempt.
Okay. I'm going to say please don't.
All right.
Unless you're feeling particularly self-destructive. Just call me and I'll go see Deadpool and Wolverine with you.
Yeah.
Because
I see.
Life is too short to watch Son of the Mask.
Okay.
So don't do that to yourself.
You're not a fan. Hashtag.
It's not good. It's awful. Because, I will say, here's my last little trivia bit here, and I'll just do a little bit of background on this. My first exposure to The Mask was actually the comic book. And those eagle-eyed listeners who know about how old I would have been at the time would be sitting there going, but John, why would you have been reading the Mask comic book, which is horribly inappropriate and violent and gory, when it came out in 1991-92? You would have been like 11 or 12 years old. Yes, faithful listener, you are right.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say about that. But I really enjoyed the comic book, and some of that might explain what's wrong with me today.
All right, there it is.
John's
making the declaration.
Yeah, the comic book is extremely violent. It is, I mean, if you were to do a comic-accurate movie of this, it'd have to be rated R. There'd be no other way. So much of, when I think of what a comic-accurate Mask movie would look like, I think of the best parts of the Deadpool movies. Like a lot of the humor, a lot of the breaking the fourth wall type stuff, the R-rated language and violence and all of that. I think you're looking at more of that realm rather than a PG-13. When this movie came out, I immediately was like, oh, well, this is funny, and I enjoy Jim Carrey. Like, he's fun. I liked Ace Ventura, and this is hilarious. I love this movie. But at the same time, I was like, but this is like a kid's version of what I've been reading in the comic. So, and I think I have. I was looking back on my shelf. I believe I have all the comics that they ever came out with in The Mask. Some of them in collected form, some in regular single comic form. But it did. Actually, the comics took a bit of a turn to being less violent once this movie came out. Like, once audiences really responded well to the Jim Carrey Mask, then they kind of took the comics in that direction, and it became a little bit more of the goofy, zany, off-the-wall stuff rather than the, I'm an agent of chaos, and I just want to kill as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because, in fact, his name, he's not even, I don't believe he's referred to, it's been a while since I've read him, I don't even believe he's referred to as the Mask in the comics. He's referred to as the Big Head Killer.
Hmm.
And that's what the public knows him by, is the Big Head Killer. Like, you have the moment where there's a famous scene in the comic where, what is it, he comes in with the mufflers and he's like, hold on to your lug nuts, it's time for an overhaul. When he says that in the movie, in the comic, I vividly remember there's like a full page image of him holding a muffler, and you know exactly what he's about to do with it. And I will tell you, the guys in the comic books, they do not survive. But there's a famous picture of the Mask from the comic holding the muffler going, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. And you know where he's about to shove it. So, yes, very, very different. So I may ask the question later on, is if you were going to try to recast this and have somebody today play the Mask, who would you consider? But in my mind, even as I ask, if I'm going to ask that question later on, I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be somebody who you could go back and forth from the zany, goofy comedy to, I think he might kill someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to have maybe a little bit more of an edge to you than what Jim Carrey can do. In a city where nothing ever seems to change, Stanley Ipkiss is the nice guy who might just finish first with the help of a mysterious ancient mask. With a mischievous alter ego, he'll take on the ambitious crook Dorian Terrell and sweep the bombshell singer Tina Carlisle off her feet. But who's the real hero? Is it Stanley, or is it the Mask?
This is the story of Stanley Ipkiss.
Stanley, you are the nicest guy. Really, you are.
Yeah. His job is at the bank.
You're 40 minutes late. Now, that's the same as stealing.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dickey. It'll never happen again.
He loves his dog.
Come on, bro. Give him to me. Drop it.
He's polite to his landlord.
Do you have any idea what time it is?
You know, Mrs. Peenman?
What?
Nothing.
And the most exciting thing in his life are his pajamas. But now, all that is about to change. Because Stanley Ipkiss is not the man he used to be.
Smokin! It's like it brings your innermost desires to life. You become some sort of love-crazy wild man.
I want him here tomorrow, alive.
Now, you have to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Do ya, punks?
Jim Carrey is... The Mask.
Ooh, somebody stop me!
Some of that music sounded a little bit like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, or
Yeah.
not quite. It sounded like that, but a little off.
Yeah, maybe that in a minor.
Yeah.
Sorry, that in a minor key or something.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, our 10 major moments. We break down the plot for you, so you don't have to. 10 major moments. Insecure bank teller Stanley Ipkiss endures constant ridicule from those around him, except for his supportive best friend, Charlie Shoemaker. Stanley's mundane life takes a bit of a turn when he becomes enamored with Tina Carlisle, the dazzling girlfriend of gangster Dorian Terrell, who enters the bank as part of Terrell's plan to rob it later on. After being humiliated at the Coco Bongo nightclub and having his car break down, Stanley finds a mysterious wooden mask near the harbor bridge. When he puts it on at home, he transforms into a green-faced, zoot-suited character with cartoonish abilities, embodying his wildest and most repressed desires. As the Mask, Stanley unleashes his newfound powers on Edge City, wreaking havoc and exacting revenge on those people who have wronged him, including his grumpy landlady and the mechanics who scammed him.
I bet.
Yeah. Let's see. This night of mayhem marks the beginning of his double life as a chaotic trickster. To get some money before he heads off to one of Tina's performances, Stanley as the Mask robs his own bank. Unbeknownst to him, that action inadvertently foils Dorian Terrell's planned bank heist. Later at the Coco Bongo, Stanley as the Mask captivates the crowd with an extravagant dance with Tina, but is forced to flee when confronted by Terrell. The next morning, Stanley's visited by Lieutenant Mitch Kellaway, who's investigating the criminal activities of the mask. Stanley, meanwhile, learns from psychiatrist Arthur Newman that the mask could be a creation of Loki, a Norse god, and that its powers are tied to the wearer's suppressed emotions. I will say, way before the Marvel movies came out, this was the first time I ever remember hearing the name Loki and learning what it was.
It's kind of fun to hear it in a non-Marvel setting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stanley meets Tina as the mask to confess his feelings, but they are interrupted by the police. After an escape, Stanley is betrayed by reporter Peggy Brandt, who sells him out to Terrell for a reward so she can keep her condo. Terrell steals the mask, becoming a monstrous version of himself, and frames Stanley for the bank robbery. Passed away a few years ago, but it was just in a ton of TV credits. I think in scenes where you're not necessarily seeing his face, but it's more just like he has the big hulking body of being the evil mask, played by the same actor who I believe also has passed away, same actor that played Bane, the really terrible version of Bane in the Batman and Robin movie.
Mm.
Tyrell steals the mask, becoming the monstrous version of himself, frames Stanley for the bank robbery. Tina visits Stanley in jail and urges him to escape the city if he can. However, she is kidnapped by Terrell as she plans to escape, and he's going to use her as a pawn in his plan to take over the Coco Bongo during a charity event and get back at his mob boss. With time running out, Stanley's dog Milo actually helps him escape from jail. Stanley then infiltrates the charity ball at the Coco Bongo, where Tyrell, now wearing the mask, is about to blow up the club. With some help from Tina and Milo, who briefly puts on the mask himself and becomes Doggy Mask, Stanley battles Terrell and his henchmen in a desperate bid to save Tina and stop the explosion. During that battle, Stanley manages to retrieve the mask. He uses its powers to dispose of the bomb just in time, sends Tyrell spiraling down into the club's ornamental fountain, basically flushing him into the fountain, and ends his reign of terror. As the police arrive, they arrest Tyrell's gang. Stanley is hailed as a hero. The next day, he's exonerated and more confident than he was to begin with. Stanley returns to the harbor bridge with Tina. She throws the mask back into the water, symbolizing Stanley's decision to embrace his true self without the need for the mask's powers. As they share a kiss, Milo retrieves the mask, hinting at possibly some future adventures, which never come. That is the 10 major moments. Now we can put on our own metaphorical masks and go into some deep thoughts.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
I have an opinion on this matter.
Don't mince words, Bones. What do you really think?
Do you remember the first time you saw this one? Did you see it in the theater?
I think I did.
I did not. HBO rental, something like that.
Okay. This was definitely a theater one for me.
This had to be hysterical in theater.
I might have seen it twice in the theater. It's the same as a 13-ish year old kid. I feel like I had the same reaction to The Mask at that time as I do to seeing the Deadpool movies in theaters now.
Okay.
And that is, I just have, I mean, Pat knows. He went to go see it with me. I have the most fun going to see these Deadpool movies.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing for me as a kid to go see The Mask. Because I had a little bit of that, like a lot of my friends were not necessarily comic book readers. And if they were reading like X-Men comics and Wolverine comics and Spider-Man comics, but they weren't reading Dark Horse comics. So I was like the weirdo that read like, what are these other, like there are comic books that don't have superheroes in them? Like, yeah, there are. Some of them are pretty freaking crazy. And so I was the one weirdo 13-year-old that was reading the stuff that nobody else was reading. So I got to go into this movie, and I feel like the same thing walking into the Deadpool movies. I was telling Pat when we went to go see it, I said, the fun thing for me about these Deadpool movies is I feel like I know so much of the source material that they're drawing all of these little jokes and Easter eggs from, that I'm able to have a level of fun at this movie that just from that knowledge, I think there's a level of fun that I have at this movie that a lot of other people, you might not be able to share that kind of level of fun just because I have wasted a lot of my life learning these other things.
Right.
And that's how The Mask felt. I remember going with some friends or just going to this theater and thinking, okay, I know when they drop this character's name, I know who Kellaway is because I know he was in the comics. When they drop this character's name, when they mention Stanley Ipkiss, if they keep his name as the main character's name, okay, I know. Oh, wait a minute. What happened to his girlfriend? He had a girlfriend in the comics. Actually, she ends up wearing the mask. Where'd she go? So, I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that going into the movie, I was like, okay, well, I'm curious how they do this. How are they going to portray this thing? And so, to me, it was the same. It was like the kid version of what gets me excited about the Deadpool movies now.
Right.
So, given the movies that we've been watching for Jim Carrey for this particular month, I might even say that The Mask might be my favorite Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah.
And I really love The Truman Show. And I really love some of his others. But when I think about it, if I'm looking at a balance of early, goofy, zany Jim Carrey with a little bit of the serious Jim Carrey that we're going to get later on, I think this movie has a good mixture of those two because it's not as zany, crazy, wacky, off the wall as Ace Ventura, but it still has some of that kind of stuff in it when he's the Mask. But then you also get serious, sincere Jim Carrey that you're going to get a little bit later on, like with The Truman Show and stuff like that. I might say in my head, this is the most Jim Carrey of Jim Carrey movies.
That's, yeah.
This is the most Jim Carrey of the Jim Carrey.
But does Jim Carrey know? If Jim Carrey could carry a movie, would Jim Carrey carry this movie?
1 + 2 + 2 + 1 + 1 + 2.
Yeah. If Jim Carrey and Harry Carey walked into a bar and met Cary Grant,
I don't.
There was going to be something else there, but Carrie from Sex and the City? I don't know.
Sure, why not?
Sure. I will just think of as many Carries. Ooh, Jim Carrey as Carrie in the movie Carrie, where she kills everybody with her telekinesis in the gym during prom.
I don't even know where to go with all that.
They're all going to laugh at you. That's right. Have you seen Carrie? That's a completely different movie.
I don't think I have.
It's a horror movie.
Okay. Well,
but
I try to branch out where I can.
Maybe we'll watch it sometime. So,
right.
How did when you saw this movie, was it you just enjoyed it because it was wacky Jim Carrey stuff? And what was it like? How did it compare? We've talked last week about Ace Ventura. When you saw this one, if you saw this one close to the same time as seeing Ace Ventura, did it feel like more of the same? Did it feel like it was different?
It certainly went to a pattern of Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
Silly, slapstick, physical comedy, weird vocal thing, like just a style, maybe is a better word than pattern.
Yeah.
But I don't think he got to that point where he was making the same movie yet. I think that comes a little later in his career, where he is all of a sudden somehow making the same movie again. I think they were different enough, at least at the time. And when I watched them both for this discussion, I didn't feel like I was watching the same movie.
Mm-hmm.
You can certainly see Jim Carrey and his goofy stuff coming in, but I didn't find them to be too similar.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Bo. I think you said it like super eloquently, and I'm not going to try and alter that at all. Yeah, I'm not going to change anything. I think that's exactly it. I think in Ace Ventura, you do get a lot more of the zany character. But the nice thing about Ace Ventura is that, he's zany and he's eccentric, but then you see like the real person in him too, right? Like he's good at investigation and he can have a real conversation with someone. This one, I think that takes it even, it takes it even in a different direction because the core character in this is just a regular guy, right? Kind of an underdog. He describes himself in the middle of it, just, a somewhat repressed, bottled up kind of guy. And I think Jim Carrey pulls that off really well. Reactions and facial features and all that kind of stuff that he's just so talented at using, he saves for his alter ego Mask character And in the meanwhile, he just kind of plays the regular average Joe kind of guy and, just kind of humble, easily embarrassed. And he's able to use that wonderful physical comedy gift to bring that out. But yeah, I think he uses the same gifts, but he's playing different characters,
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite things about this movie, I think, is if you watched, as you were kind of growing up, as you watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit just a few years before this, then this is almost like a next step. Like, you're getting older. This is a little bit more adult, but it's still very similar. It's that mixture of the real with the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a living Looney Tunes character, basically. And so I think, for me as a kid who loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like absolutely loved that movie, I think that's one of the things I loved about this one too. Knowing that it still kind of felt that way. It was that fun mixture of the cartoon, the special effects, with the actual real actors doing their things. And it's one of the things that I think is kind of fun about, I've been finding or reading some different conversations online. And I've heard a lot of people commenting. I was curious about what you guys thought about this. I've heard a lot of people commenting and saying, basically, they feel like visual effects in movies hit their peak in the 90s.
Okay.
And I think the argument is because in the 90s, we weren't so reliant on digital and visual effects, CGI, as we became in the 2000s and beyond. And now, which is kind of interesting, you look back at some of the 90s visual effects, like I think about this movie. For the most part in this movie, except for maybe one or two moments, the visual effects in this movie totally stand up 30 years later.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen some recent stuff that I look at and I go, that looks terrible. So it's not like 30 years later we've automatically come to a place where like, oh yes, all CGI will look amazing because we've had this for 30 plus years and look at what we can do now. So I've heard some people argue that maybe the late 90s is where we peaked in terms of visual effects.
Okay.
And since then, it maybe has either not progressed or even gone downhill because it's more about, okay, we just got to do this cheaper and faster. So I don't know. Have you guys thought about that? Have you noticed any of that?
I don't know if I would say that the 90s was the top time of visual effects, but I think what you did have in the 90s is, you were striking a balance. What's a great example of a movie from the 90s? Jurassic Park. It was so good because they used combination practical effects, digital effects. They used all the different tools they had. They weren't, nothing was the golden goose where we're going to just get off the bus at that stop and use only these kind of effects. We're only going practical. We're only going digital. They used all the tools that they had to make the movie to the best of their ability. And I think those are the movies that hold up. Just like Jaws, right? The mechanical shark didn't work. So what did they do? They used editing and soundtrack and the effects that they could control. Okay, well, that movie still holds up from today. So I think, they weren't pushing effects just for effects' sake. They weren't avoiding effects to make things look retro, or they just used the tools they had to make the best movie they could. And that's the kind of stuff that, in my estimation, that's the kind of stuff that holds up.
Yeah.
Certain movies lend themselves to certain types of effects.
Yeah.
And I think you have to take that into account. Some things aren't doable in non-computer generated effects. It just shortchanges all the things we can do.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think about this movie is, if I was thinking about if somebody tried to update this for today, would they make the mask face CGI? Because I think one of the things I think is so good about it is you have somebody who's so expressive, like Jim Carrey is, and it's a practical mask. It's a rubber mask or whatever it was they used to make it, but it's his, basically, except for it being a mask, it's his face. And I think that's one of the things that work. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to see what it would look like, but I just don't know if it comes out looking as good if it's a CGI face that can do like crazy, crazy cartoonish things.
I think you end up, sometimes people can get overexcited with those effects.
Yeah.
And be tempted to do too much. I think the less is more theory is always better in that case.
Yeah. I was reading a fun line about how how originally this was supposed to be a mixture of like cartoons and horror. The guys who were kind of revamping The Mask after one of its initial comic book runs described it as a combination of Tex Avery and the Terminator. If you guys remember who Tex Avery is, he did a lot of the work to help with the evolution of characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. He was huge back in the Looney Tunes days. And so that was kind of their thought, is like, it's a mixture of Looney Tunes and the Terminator. And there's going to be about that much violence and death. So originally when New Line picked up on this, their original plan for this was that was going to be, because that's why they got the Nightmare on Elm Street director to do this, was they figured this is going to be our next horror franchise. We're going to have a bunch of movies about this character called the Mask, and he's going to go around killing people in really violent ways. Let's get a Freddy Krueger director to direct this thing. And then when they gave it to that director, Chuck Russell, he turned around and he was like, yeah, I've been reading the comics and I don't care for the violence in this. So I'm going to go with a little bit more of a family-friendly thing here. So that in and of itself, I think was kind of an interesting choice. Was they originally planned for this to be a horror franchise on the same level as like a new version of a horror franchise, like a Freddy Krueger or a Friday the 13th or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they did it the right way with what they got.
I don't think it would have made as much money if they had done it the other way. At some point during my life, I would love to see somebody do maybe a comic accurate version of this just to kind of see what it would look like. But I think what they did at the time they did it and what they chose to do, I think they did it just right. They never would have made the, whatever it was, $350 million. They wouldn't have made that if they had just gone with a straight R horror movie.
Because there's already a lot of horror movies. So you got to like make it stand out somehow.
What is your favorite in this movie? What is your favorite, let's say, favorite scene or favorite little kind of movie reference joke that he does? I'm going to say I've always been partial to the Cuban Pete dance number.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking the same thing. Like that's the... When you think of this movie, that's the thing you picture.
Yeah.
Is that dance. That whole shtick.
I do that, but I also, probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is when they're shooting at him in the club the first time and he's changing into he's changing into the Russian character, he's changing into Elvis, and then finally changes into the cowboy. And then when they shoot him and he starts to, you got me, partner. And then he does that whole thing where he's doing his death scene. Tell Annie M to let old Yeller out. And he starts coughing and tell Scarlett I do give it out. And then eventually he dies. Then everybody's crying, and all of a sudden the audience pops up at the bottom and they hand him the fake Oscar statue.
That was pretty good.
And then
Then
he pulls the was it the Sally Field Oscar acceptance speech? You love me. You really love me.
You really love me.
And almost my favorite part, like all that other stuff, my favorite part is just the little thing he does that is almost imperceptible. Just how he sticks with that character to where he's acting like he's about to walk off the Oscar stage and he's gone the wrong direction. He's, oh, wait, no, I'm going this way. Okay. And he turns back around, and then immediately he's got the gun in his face. My favorite moment of all of that is when he pretends to be talking to somebody off stage who's directing him that he's supposed to be exiting the other way.
That's pretty awesome.
Like that.
Yeah, it was the one-armed man stuff is good.
Do to me, Sarge. Yeah.
Very good.
And I love the callbacks later on where Kellaway and Doyle are talking, and Doyle just makes this offhanded comment. He's like, yeah, the SWAT team got offers to play on Broadway.
Yeah. You mentioned the Cuban Pete, the big dance thing. I like the Hey Pachuco
I figured
sequence.
You would.
Oh.
Yeah. Something about that. It just, I don't know. I figured, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The spicy meatball Alka-Seltzer thing is funny.
Well, you've got so many of the... Isn't Harry Connick Jr. on the soundtrack somewhere?
He might be. To be honest, I haven't...
Yeah, so the soundtrack has the Brian Setzer Orchestra, Susan Boyd, Fishbone, Vanessa Williams, Domino, and Harry Connick Jr.
There
so, I
we
mean,
go.
it's a pretty good soundtrack, too.
Yeah.
And this was right at the onset of that real revival in swing music.
Yeah, yeah.
It was right when the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, the Squirrel Nut Zippers, and Brian Setzer Orchestra, and
I mean,
all those groups.
You could probably argue this might have been the movie, like in terms of a movie that was helping bring it back. This might have been the movie that helped bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't hurt.
No. And, there was the movie Swingers, where those guys were, they were, I can't remember how much like big band music there was, but I want to say they were always going to like the lounge thing. It was a revival of that 1960s Cool Cat hangout type thing.
Yeah.
And this was, I think, a little bit more of that, supposed to have that 1930s, 1940s Rocketeer kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
But the music was just so great.
Yeah. Because I feel like some of that swing music... Bo, I'm trying to remember this. You and I went to the same high school. And I feel like I have this image in my mind that at some of the assemblies that we had in school in the mid to late 90s, I feel like for some reason we had like a swing club. Did we have that? Okay. Because
we did.
I'm vividly remembering that. I'm vividly remembering that a couple people that were in that club I thought were really obnoxious, but
I
thought the music was nice.
Uh-oh. Did they carry the swinger thing too far?
No.
Not that kind, no.
No.
Bo probably knows them better than I do.
No. That's not what I meant.
Oh,
But I mean, were they
okay.
like the? No, I meant like the 19. Did they kind of get a little too into character?
Memories, Pat. That's all it is.
Okay. Oh, I know. Okay, so I wandered into the middle of some high schools. I know I just stuck my foot in it. I'm just not sure.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I might have caused a problem. I might have brought something up for Bo that I didn't know was going to bring up.
Just old memories. Yeah.
Memories that he didn't know he had.
Yeah.
I went to a place.
Okay. I didn't realize that my series of words and phrases were activating the Winter Soldier in Bo.
Something like
Comrade.
that.
Yeah.
Rainstorm. Snow.
Zoot-suit.
Zoot.
Now Bo's going to kill someone.
Did. There was a swing club in high school.
Member?
Depending on your definition of member, there may have been some times when I thought maybe I wanted to be, but the reasons may not have been altruistic. Maybe.
Who is the lady?
I don't see anything wrong with any of this.
Unless you analyze, like, you ever look back on the things you did and go, oh,
Daily.
I know we can't be held completely accountable for the things we did when we were 16 and 17, but good God almighty. And I happen to be coming from a party where I told the story of how Donna and I met, and another person who attended this party, who I had only met once before, was very impressed at my confidence in going back to talk to someone who had rejected is a strong word, but the first time I met Donna, she wasn't as receptive to going out with me as I might have thought.
Okay.
And he was talking about how he was impressed with my confidence that I went back, that he could never have done that. And I remember thinking, well, gosh, at the time I really thought we had a connection. The timing wasn't right. And, the second try was months later, whatever. But then when John mentioned my misspent youth, I start to remember at one point how not confident I was and the things I might have done. And it just brought back a lot. That's all.
Okay. All right.
Oh, man. Drink.
And I honestly did not do that on purpose.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I probably tried to downplay that in public.
Okay.
But,
all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Good God. I hadn't thought about that in a while. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Glad that we could help you stumble down memory lane.
Yeah. Good God.
Yeah. What is this editing thing you speak of?
Yes, I know. I know.
Nobody listens to this show.
Well,
it's like 3 people in Ireland, and that's really all that listens to the show. So,
and we love them.
We love them very much.
Yes. Ireland, I think Ireland and Canada.
That's fine.
Best that way, probably.
It's best.
You might have managed to offend all of them.
So, before we get into our 3 questions, this movie is just so much fun for me, and I have not watched it in quite a while. And just being able to go back to it and to watch it with the kids. I mean, of course, they were on their phones half the time while we were watching this, but I enjoyed it, and that's maybe all that matters.
You got half the time out of it. That's not bad.
Maybe half the time. Probably not. They were probably on their phones the majority of the time.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
That's the one thing. Like, I was, I'd seen this movie before, so I wasn't watching with, right? I probably had my laptop open and was doing a couple things, but
sure.
It's so visually stunning at times.
Mm-hmm.
And the music is so good. Like, there are times when you just stop to look at this movie.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's the
fun.
It's the methane emissions. They really bring out the colors in the sky.
Yeah.
I love that landfill park. All right. Anything else before we get into our 3 questions? Anything else we want to talk about related to The Mask? We will tell the folks, Bo, you brought this one up. There is a movie from 1961 called The Mask, not related to this at all. But
it is about a mask that sort of takes over your life.
Yeah, but it looks kind of interesting. Like, it was a 3D movie from the 60s and has some like weird, trippy kind of stuff to it. I think I was able to find a link where you can watch the whole thing online, but it also looks like you can easily get the DVD or Blu-ray off of Amazon. If you're a collector of boutique DVDs and Blu-rays, I believe this one is available through the distributor. Is it Kino Lorber? I think sells some DVDs and Blu-rays of the kind where you would find something like a Damselvis Daughter of Helvis type movie. I believe they have copies of this one through their platform as well.
Right. Cool.
But yeah, it looks like as far as I know, it has nothing to do with this movie, but the similarities there are really surprising, and I'd never heard of it, so I was glad you mentioned it, Bo.
Well, I do what I can.
You do.
You do it quite well.
It's appreciated.
I thank you.
You're the best at what you do.
You're the best there is at what you do.
Yeah. All right. It's time for 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right. 3 questions. Question number 1. What is your favorite mask, helmet, or cowl in a TV show or movie? This could be a superhero, could be a bank robber, could be a warrior of some kind, whatever you want.
Wow, Dark Helmet
Mm.
from Spaceballs. I mean, the comical size of the thing is just too much.
Yeah.
And it might be a little recency bias. We're about to talk about Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles, so we have been discussing Mel Brooks recently.
Yes.
But I will say the Dark Helmet mask is a favorite prop of mine.
That's an excellent one. I feel like it's stupid of me to say anything other than the Rocketeer.
And I would expect no less.
Yeah.
I almost think I know what Pat might say, but we'll see.
I'll be curious. I have some runners up, but we'll see what Pat says.
I'm kind of curious. Do you mind if we maybe upend the typical thing? I'm having a hard time locking in on this without saying every helmet is cool. Bo, I'd like to know what you think for me.
I thought a no-brainer you would go with a Batman. I wasn't necessarily sure if you had a favorite cowl design, but I thought you would land on a Batman, one of them.
I was thinking Batman, but then I'm like, I don't know. Is that the low-hanging fruit? Is that easy? Does everyone say Batman? But yeah, I think Batman is just so awesome. I have to be honest, 89 Batman, and it was just so iconic for me. And that was one of the first kind of more dark, macabre kind of movies that I remember going to see in versions of Batman because I wasn't reading the comics. And I just like that. I mean, now every superhero movie features, like a rubberized, what do they say in Captain Marvel, scuba suit kind of a thing. But that was new then. So I think that was such a cool looking mask.
Yeah.
I think that's a good call. And I was kind of thinking Batman, but then I thought it was easy.
Sometimes easy is just right.
I want to be careful with spoilers because I know it's a fresh movie and we just did it. But can I just say there's a certain scene in Deadpool and Wolverine? Is that okay to say, John, or do we need to
No, that's
should
fine.
I strike that from? Okay.
No, that's one of my follow-up questions or
Okay.
answers.
Yeah. I've got to give mention to that.
Yeah.
Cartoons, all the mask from the Mask cartoon. All those cool helmets that would drop down. I thought that was awesome.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Did I just nail another one of your runner-ups?
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I always used to think those things just looked so cool. And those had like powers or something. That was kind of their like heads-up display and they can control stuff.
Where can we find that?
Yeah, no kidding. And then, I mean...
It's on Tubi.
Nice.
There it is.
I think both seasons.
Now I'm going to be.
Tubi.
There you go.
That's the question. I think there's no way to get around like the Iron Man, Tony Stark, the MCU thing. I mean, that touched off the whole MCU, right? So, I mean, I would just say the way they did the effects and the mask effect. And I know that like folks say, oh, well, that's just an actor having to not, react to someone else or another actor. They just have a camera in their face and they just have to react. And that's not, I've heard people say, well, that's not really acting and that's not what, and it's just kind of like, okay, I kind of hear you, but then basically what more test of an actor is there than you don't have someone else, you don't have stuff moving around you, you just have a camera in your face and you've got to react. Robert Downey Jr. is so fantastic of those reactions when he's in the mask, when he's in the suit and whether he's arrogant and having a good time fighting the bad guys or whether he's about to sacrifice himself and he's upset or worried or sad. I think that's basically what it is a close-up on an actor and them reacting. So I think that I'd have to put that Iron Man mask on there as well.
Yeah. My follow-ups on here, and Pat, I'll give you a moment if you need to take a look at and then either comment on. There was a mask that a certain person wears in the movie Brotherhood of the Wolf that I thought maybe you'd choose that one, but I dropped a link in the chat.
I know what character, John.
Oh, okay.
I'm well aware of what you had to say.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm trying to keep it family friendly, my friend.
All right.
That's the stuff that dreams are made of.
I figured your response would be not only do I like that mask, I would like to be that mask.
Oh, Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver.
I believe you can get me through the night.
Yep. Give Pat just a moment there, let him recover. I think my runners up were, I said the Wolverine mask from Deadpool and Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that one was awesome. Like if you're like for the first ever kind of live action Wolverine mask, I thought that one was pretty cool. The other one I'm going to go with, just because I also absolutely love this movie, is V for Vendetta.
Oh,
The Guy Fawkes mask.
There you go.
All right, question number 2. What is your favorite Cameron Diaz movie?
Ooh.
Yes.
Dreamweaver.
I believe you can get me through the night.
Yaddy, Shwing.
Oh, let's see.
Pat's response is, she's Abraham Lincoln.
She is that.
I'm going to go with probably what I feel like is maybe her most intense movie that I've seen her in. She Crazy in Vanilla Sky.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, She Crazy.
I think I
I
might
have yet
have
to
to go
see that
that
movie.
one. Oh, you haven't seen? Oh, that's a good one.
I haven't seen that movie.
I might have to say there's something about Mary.
Well, she was dating Brett Favre, so I mean that's one of the most epic roles of all time.
Who's Brett Favre? And
The best part is throughout the movie they just refer to him as Brett.
Yep,
Brett. And that movie came out. Was that 95 or was that 96?
Something about Mary. That was.
Or was it
looking
later?
at it right here.
That was 98.
98.
98. You still have some time, but still, I mean, that was right when the Packers were just getting, well, not just getting hot because they'd already won the Super Bowl, but they were still like either content. Like that was right at the height of all the Brett Favre mania and all that kind of stuff. So they're just talking about Brett and Brett this and Brett that. And we all, okay, now we're getting into talking about that movie, but that was right. I was up in school in Wisconsin and all of a sudden they just talk about
wow.
Brett.
Yeah, that had to be a thing.
Oh, and then all of a sudden it was Brett Favre. Everyone, the Green Bay Packers in Wisconsin. I mean, my God, it was like the first game of the season. And they beat, I forget whatever year it was, and they beat San Francisco. And my God, the campus just went crazy. And there were people flipping cars and the whole thing. And yeah, they just go crazy for the Packers there. And yeah, when Brett ended up being Brett, and it was Ben Stiller, the one that says, and even if you want to be with Brett Favre, just God. Oh, you dropped a little bit of hair lotion there, or hair mousse there.
Mm-hmm. What was my other one?
Did Pat give one before I grab another one?
I have not given one. What was that?
I think officially, no, you haven't given one.
I have not officially. I've kind of +1 to all of your choices. I'm going to say Gangs of New York. Solid. Of all the movies she's been in, just as a movie, that one's my favorite. It's great seeing her in that role. I don't know. It's like, has she done many other like historical, like more historical epic type things besides that? I mean, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle, clearly, but
no, I don't think so. I'm trying to think of other. Not.
Yeah. Her filmography is interesting, very much. But I'm going to say Gangs of New York.
Okay.
I really like her in that.
Bo, did we get yours yet?
I had said something about Mary.
That's right.
But the other one, a lesser known one that I enjoy once in a while, is The Holiday.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
My other two that I were going to mention, and they kind of come early on in her career, so we're still kind of in the mid to late 90s, actually late 90s, is she's good in My Best Friend's Wedding. And then the other one that I've seen a couple of times, but it's been a while, but I remember enjoying, was Very Bad Things.
Oh, yeah.
That one, Christian Slater's in it. A bunch of people are in it. Christian Slater, Daniel Stern. The most confusing thing about that movie for me is that up until very, very recently, I have a really hard time distinguishing between Jeremy Piven and Jon Favreau. Like they kind of just look like the same person to me.
I can see that.
Yeah. But they're both in that movie, which made it even tougher.
Yep.
Gauntlet thrown down.
Yeah. All right. And number 3, favorite moment in a movie when a character breaks the fourth wall. I'm just going to say all 3 Deadpool movies.
Deadpool's definitely top of the list there, and they do it so well.
It's ingrained. It's cooked into the movie.
Have you guys seen, I don't know if you've seen it yet. I think I have copies of the 2 movies that are out so far, but the one copy I don't have that I would love to get is the PG-13 version of Deadpool 2. Have you guys seen that version?
No.
So they brought it back out at Christmas time, and they called it I think it was called Once Upon a Deadpool.
Okay.
If I may be getting the name of it wrong, but it was the PG-13. So it was Deadpool 2, but it was the PG-13 version. And what made it different was they did cut out certain scenes, so it was not R-rated. But my favorite thing about that version of the movie is they framed the entire thing as if Deadpool has kidnapped Fred Savage, adult Fred Savage, has tied him down to a bed in a recreation of his room from Princess Bride, and Deadpool is reading him the story of Deadpool 2. And it is hilarious because Fred Savage will make all these comments back to him. Like he'll stop the story just the way, kid Fred Savage did that in Princess Bride. He'll stop the story and he'll be like, wait, hold on a second. So in this scene, so you got your arm cut off and your body can regrow another arm, but doesn't that mean that the severed arm could also regrow another body? So aren't there like a lot of Deadpools running around every time you get an appendage cut off, and Deadpool's just sitting there and be like, shut up. Just shut up. No, it is hilarious. And you can find some of these scenes on YouTube, but I want to find a copy of that so I can just watch the movie from beginning to end. That one is funny because they get into a little bit of a debate where Fred Savage says something like, I prefer Marvel movies. And Deadpool's like, well, this is a Marvel movie. He's like, yeah, but no, it's Marvel in conjunction with Fox. So it's not really a Marvel movie. But it's cute that you think that.
That's hilarious.
So I'll just say all the Deadpool movies, but I do really love all the scenes that I've seen from the PG-13 Deadpool 2 where Fred Savage is helping him tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. I was thinking Ferris Bueller.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're still here.
It's over.
Go home.
Life moves pretty fast.
I think any Mel Brooks movie, he is so skilled with putting that in there. I mean, Fourth Wall Break and Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, History of the World. It's good to be the king.
Fight Club does a little bit of that.
Right.
Yeah. Wayne's World.
Mm-hmm. Wait, hey-oh. Only Garth and I can talk to the camera.
Yeah. Airplane.
Yeah.
I'm just running through a list of Monty Python.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is I'm just giving myself a whole bunch of movies to go watch.
Right? Like that's the hard part here.
The problem is this is what we tend to do.
You end up with homework.
We start to list movies. I'm like, okay, I don't have time to watch this right now, but I'm going to make time.
Yeah. You've got to, mister.
I think I have work tomorrow.
Yeah, I think you're looking peak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't have work.
Yeah.
What work do you have to do?
All right. Well, that is our 3 questions, and that's going to do it for this episode. If you have not seen The Mask, go check it out. If you're adventurous and you want to check out the 1961 Mask movie, feel free to go check that out too. If you search around a bit, I think you can find it streaming somewhere. And then if you're very adventurous, you could check out the Mask comics. I believe you can get a bunch of them in collected versions at bookstores, Amazon, wherever you order that type of stuff. But yeah, they have a lot of them collected, but there's some really good ones like The Mask. The original series, if you're looking for the comics, Mask Returns, Mask Strikes Back, and I think that original storyline ends with a short series called The Hunt for Green October. There's a bunch after that too, and they are hilarious. When I was in 8th grade, I used to take a pad of paper with me, and if I wasn't hanging out with friends or whatever, I would go down to, there were some baseball fields, kind of like the public park area baseball fields where we had lived in Missouri. I'd go down there, and I would sit in the dugout or somewhere there. I was convinced I was going to grow up to be a comic book writer. And so I'd like write out these stories.
Comic book writer.
Yeah, there you go. A comic book writer. Yeah. And so I would write out all these little stories. One of the stories that I had kind of written out for myself was a team up between the Mask and the Joker.
Okay.
Yes.
But
yes.
And what would happen if the Joker got a hold of the Mask and put it on?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I had this whole story written out of what would happen, and then Batman would come in at one point and all this. And so I had this whole thing done. Obviously, I was 8th grade, and I did not get hired by one of the major comic book companies. And
their loss.
Exactly.
Right,
Crime against literature.
Well, so then I look, and just a few years ago, I believe they did do Joker versus Mask. When did that come out? Published in the year 2000. Yeah, it was a 4-issue crossover between The Mask and Batman, published in the year 2000. And I'm like, that, I have not read it, but like I had some really, really good ideas. And yeah, I don't know if I want to read it because I feel like I'd look at it and go, yeah, I would have done that.
Well, you're just going to be mad that they stole all your good ideas.
Or that they didn't even use my good ideas. Yeah. So.
Who did you tell that you'd written this mashup?
I told no one.
Because I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of...
Unless they stole it. Oh, no, because I would handwrite it on paper first, and then I would type it. So the only way somebody got it is if they stole my 3.5-inch floppy disk that this all was saved on.
Right.
Which is possible.
Yeah.
There's some nefarious characters around.
There are some nefarious characters.
There are.
There are not a lot of nefarious characters that are, technologically minded in Southwest Missouri at that particular time in the early to mid 90s.
That is probably
I lived it. I experienced it.
That was
the nearest place to dial in. The nearest place to dial in for internet was an hour and a half away. So,
oh Lord,
right?
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the 30-something movie podcast. We thank you, as always, for being here with us. If you want to catch the rest of this month, it is Jim Carrey month. It is absolutely smoking, full of some great episodes. We did Ace Ventura. We've just done The Mask. Next week is Dumb and Dumber. Week after that is In Living Color, the TV series. Best of Jim Carrey skits is kind of going to be our focus for that one. If you are over there following us on Patreon and supporting us there, first of all, big, huge thank you. Our Patreon episode for this month is Blazing Saddles. Excuse us while we whip out this recording. And then our Patreon short is Beetlejuice from this year. That'll just be like a short 10-15 minute deal related to that new Beetlejuice movie coming out. So super excited for that one too. Bo, Pat, thank you for being here.
John, thank you John, as always, for keeping us on track and keeping us on topic.
I don't do that, but I do keep you hostage.
No.
The Stockholm Syndrome set in a long time ago. You don't have to worry about that.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's fine. Now that you mention that,
Stockholm Syndrome.
Speaking of Stockholm Syndrome,
oh boy,
I was kind of
What
proud.
did I do?
I don't know. I was kind of proud of myself because a few episodes ago, somebody, I don't know if it was you or I don't know if it was Pat, mentioned Stockholm Syndrome, and I think I made a comment back and I said, "I'll be your Florence Nightingale."
You did.
Oh.
I remember
I think I
this
said that.
interchange.
And then afterwards, I was like, "Wait a minute." Did I say that right? Like, is that roughly the same thing? And I went to go Google it. I was like, you know what? It's not the same thing, but it's very close. So
Yeah.
I'm happy. I was so happy with myself for making a really weird offhanded comment that was semi-related to what we were actually talking about.
We're proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of all of us. It's a lot of love here tonight. We just don't have the mask to show it.
Not yet.
But we love doing this. We love movies, and we love you all. And we hope that you all go and be excellent to each other. If you find any ancient Loki masks, maybe don't put it on.
Just don't put it
be
on.
Careful.
Keep the dog in the other room.
Yeah. Just be careful with that. But be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock, they're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can't choose, even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast, some will